The sound of a glass breaking was the first thing Elias Veyron heard when he stepped through the front door of his mansion. He had returned home hours earlier than expected, hoping to surprise his elderly mother after a difficult week of business travel. Instead, he froze in the hallway when he saw something that would change his life forever. His 80-year-old mother, Maribel Veyron, was sitting on the floor near the living room sofa, struggling to steady herself, while his fiancée, Celestine Hart, stood over her in anger. One of Celestine's feet had just struck the edge of Maribel's chair, sending it sliding across the polished floor. Elias stared in disbelief. The woman he had planned to marry was standing before the mother who had raised him alone, and for several seconds, he could not even find his voice. If you believe that kindness, respect, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder about family, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. Elias had spent years building his fortune, but his mother had never cared about his money. Maribel had raised him in a tiny apartment above an old bakery after his father disappeared when Elias was only 6. She worked long hours, sometimes returning home exhausted, yet she always found enough energy to ask her son about school, his dreams, and the kind of man he wanted to become. When Elias eventually became a successful technology investor, he bought her a beautiful home and begged her to stop working. But Maribel remained humble. She spent most mornings tending flowers, reading old books, and preparing simple meals whenever Elias visited. She often reminded him that wealth could buy comfort but never character. Celestine had entered Elias's life 2 years earlier. She was elegant, confident, and charming whenever Elias was around. She knew exactly how to impress people at business dinners and charity events. At first, Maribel welcomed her warmly. She even gave Celestine an antique bracelet that had belonged to Elias's grandmother. Maribel hoped her son had finally found someone who would love him for who he was rather than for what he owned. But slowly, little things began to change. Celestine started complaining about Maribel's habits. She disliked the elderly woman's simple clothes, her old-fashioned furniture, and the fact that she sometimes wanted to sit with Elias during dinner instead of leaving them alone. Whenever Elias was present, Celestine acted affectionate and patient. Whenever he left, her attitude became colder. Maribel tried not to create conflict. She told herself that perhaps Celestine was simply adjusting to living in a large household. She never wanted to become the reason her son's relationship failed. But that morning, something had finally gone too far. Elias rushed forward and helped his mother to her feet. Maribel looked frightened, but the first thing she did was reach for his arm and whisper that she was all right. Elias looked at her carefully and noticed the tremble in her hands. Then he turned toward Celestine. He expected an apology. Instead, Celestine immediately began explaining that Maribel had been difficult, that she had refused to listen, and that the incident had happened because she was frustrated. Elias listened silently. His expression became calmer rather than angrier, and somehow that made the room feel even heavier. Celestine expected shouting. She expected Elias to defend her, just as he had done during previous arguments. Instead, he simply asked one question: how long had this been happening? Celestine hesitated. Maribel immediately tried to stop the conversation, telling Elias that there was no need to make the situation bigger. But Elias knew his mother. She had protected him his entire life, even when she was the one who needed protection. He asked the household staff what they had witnessed. At first, everyone remained silent because they feared losing their jobs. Finally, an older housekeeper named Odessa admitted that Celestine had been increasingly disrespectful toward Maribel for months. She explained that Maribel had repeatedly asked everyone not to tell Elias because she did not want to interfere with his happiness. Another employee quietly confirmed that Celestine had insulted Maribel several times and had even tried to prevent her from using parts of the house. Elias felt something inside him break, not because his fiancée had disappointed him, but because his mother had suffered quietly while trying to protect him from the truth. He remembered being a little boy, sitting beside Maribel in their tiny kitchen while she counted coins to make sure there was enough money for groceries. He remembered the winter when she gave him her only warm coat and insisted she was not cold. He remembered the night he had been rejected from his first business competition and came home convinced he was a failure. Maribel had sat beside him until morning, telling him that losing one opportunity did not make him a loser. That woman had given him everything she had. And now, when she needed him, she had been afraid to ask for help. Elias walked to the center of the room and calmly told Celestine that their engagement was over. She stared at him as if she had misunderstood. She reminded him of the wedding plans, the invitations, the expensive arrangements, and the life they were supposed to build together. Elias replied that a beautiful wedding meant nothing if the person standing beside him did not respect the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. Celestine became emotional and insisted she could change. Elias did not humiliate her or insult her. He simply told her that some boundaries existed for a reason. He asked her to leave the house that afternoon and said that he would handle the financial arrangements fairly through their advisors. His actions shocked everyone because he did not seek revenge. He chose dignity instead. But the biggest surprise came afterward. Elias sat beside his mother and apologized for not seeing the truth sooner. Maribel tried to reassure him that she had never blamed him. She admitted that she had been afraid that telling him would make him choose between his future and his mother. Elias took her hand and told her she should never again feel that she had to suffer silently to keep him happy. For the first time in months, Maribel cried openly. Not because she was hurt, but because she finally felt heard. The following weeks were difficult for Elias. Breaking an engagement was painful enough, but learning that someone he trusted had behaved so differently behind closed doors forced him to reconsider many parts of his life. He began spending more time with his mother. Instead of expensive restaurants, they ate breakfast together in the garden. Instead of business trips filling every conversation, Elias started listening to the stories Maribel had never had time to tell him. One afternoon, Maribel showed him an old wooden box filled with photographs. There was a picture of Elias at 6 years old, holding a school certificate. Another showed him at 12, standing beside his mother outside their old apartment. Then there was a faded photograph of Maribel herself as a young woman, smiling beside a small flower garden. Elias realized that he had spent years trying to build a bigger future while forgetting to appreciate the person who had built his foundation. He made a decision. He transformed one wing of his home into a bright community center for elderly people who lived alone. Maribel helped design the garden, choosing flowers and small trees for the courtyard. Elias also created a program that provided meals, companionship, transportation, and practical assistance for older residents in the community. He did not name the center after himself. He named it Maribel's Garden. When the center opened, Maribel stood at the entrance with tears in her eyes. Dozens of elderly people arrived that morning, many of them carrying nothing but small bags and nervous smiles. Elias watched his mother welcome them one by one. That was when he finally understood something his wealth had never taught him. A person's true success was not measured by the size of a bank account, the number of properties they owned, or the people who admired them. It was measured by how they treated someone who could give them nothing in return. Months passed, and Elias became a different man. He still worked hard and remained successful, but he stopped allowing money to determine who deserved his time. He learned to notice quiet suffering. He learned to listen before judging. Most importantly, he learned that protecting someone did not always require anger or revenge. Sometimes the strongest action was simply walking away from cruelty and choosing kindness instead. Maribel eventually became the heart of the community center. Every afternoon, she sat beneath the trees and listened to visitors share stories about their lives. Some had lost loved ones. Some had been forgotten by their families. Some simply wanted someone to talk to. And Maribel always listened. One evening, as the sun moved gently across the clear daytime sky and the garden filled with soft natural light, Elias found his mother sitting beside a group of elderly visitors. She looked peaceful. He sat beside her. Maribel smiled and told him that she was proud of the man he had become. Elias smiled back and said that everything good in him had started with her. She shook her head gently and reminded him that she had only given him the beginning. He had chosen what to do with it. That sentence stayed with Elias for the rest of his life. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who values family, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may need their message most. And before the story ends, I have one special request. Comment, "Kindness begins at home," if you believe that true strength means protecting the people who love us without becoming cruel ourselves. Elias never forgot the moment he returned home early and discovered the truth hidden behind a perfect relationship. He could have responded with anger, humiliation, and revenge. Instead, he chose something more powerful. He protected his mother, ended a relationship built on disrespect, and turned a painful experience into a place where lonely people could find warmth and dignity. Because sometimes, the greatest inheritance a parent can leave a child is not money. It is a lesson about kindness. And sometimes, the greatest way a child can repay that gift is simply to remember who stood beside them when they had nothing.